For centuries, the galaxy had been drenched in fire and blood, caught in the relentless conflict between the Zorvax and the Thalnari. These two powerful civilizations had waged war for so long that neither could remember why it had begun in the first place. Entire planets had been reduced to ashes, fleets annihilated before they could even report their arrival, and countless lives lost in a war that had no end. Treaties had been signed and broken, alliances formed and shattered, yet no side could claim victory. The galaxy had long given up hope for peace. The war had become a way of life, an eternal cycle of destruction with no escape. But the tide of war was about to change, not because of a new strategy, a secret weapon, or a brilliant commander, but because of something far older, far more dangerous, and completely unexpected. Deep in the uncharted void, beyond the borders of both warring factions, an ancient star system was discovered. At first, it appeared to be abandoned, nothing more than a graveyard of long-forgotten ruins. But at its heart lay something that neither the Zorvax nor the Thalnari had ever seen before: a vast fleet of dormant warships, perfectly preserved as if they had been waiting for something or someone. Thousands of massive vessels floated silently in the dark, their metallic hulls gleaming with an eerie glow. Their designs were unlike anything seen in the known galaxy, their construction flawless despite the ages they had endured. The insignia stamped on every warship carried a name lost to time, a name whispered in the oldest of legends, property of the Terran Dominion. The discovery sent shockwaves through the highest ranks of both factions. The Zorvax believed it to be an ancient treasure trove, a fleet of derelict ships that could turn the tide of war in their favor. The Thalnari, equally desperate for an advantage, refused to let their enemies claim such a prize. Without hesitation, both factions dispatched their fleets, racing to seize the forgotten warships before the other could take control. Neither side realized the grave mistake they were about to make. When the first ships arrived, their crews boarded the mysterious vessels, expecting to find rusted controls and outdated technology. Instead, they found systems that still functioned with terrifying efficiency. The moment they touched the consoles, red warning lights illuminated the dark interiors, and screens flickered to life, displaying messages in an unknown language. Scientists scrambled to decipher the text, and after hours of effort, they managed to translate a single line: WARNING, unauthorized access detected. Some of the officers dismissed the message as nothing more than an old security measure, believing the ships to be abandoned relics with no real power. But before they could investigate further, a deep, mechanical voice echoed across the system, transmitted through every ship, every frequency. It was not a greeting. It was not a warning. It was a question. Unregistered entities detected. State your allegiance to the Terran Dominion. Silence followed. No one aboard the invading fleets knew what to say. The Terran Dominion was nothing more than a myth, a lost empire that had vanished from history. No records remained of their fate, no evidence of their existence beyond scattered ruins and forgotten whispers. The Zorvax and Thalnari had assumed that humanity had perished long ago, leaving only relics of their once great civilization. They were wrong. When no answer came, the voice spoke again. Non-compliance detected. Engaging extermination protocols. Before the invaders could react, the dormant fleet awoke. Ships that had been silent for thousands of years roared to life in an instant. Weapon systems activated, shields powered up, and targeting sensors locked onto every alien vessel in the system. Then, without warning, the warships opened fire. Energy beams cut through Zorvac and Thalnari ships like they were paper, reducing entire squadrons to debris within seconds. The invaders tried to retreat, but the ancient warships were too fast, their firepower too overwhelming. The Thalnari command ship attempted to send a distress signal, but before the message could be completed, a plasma barrage incinerated it, leaving nothing behind but glowing wreckage. The Zorvacs, known for their resilience and unmatched combat tactics, desperately tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the surface of the Terran warships. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. The galaxy had known war for generations, but never had it witnessed destruction on such a scale. These were not ordinary ships. They did not fight like any known military force. They moved with terrifying precision, their formations shifting in perfect coordination as if guided by a single, unseen commander. There were no human crews aboard these vessels, no living beings giving orders. And yet, they fought as if they had never been gone. In less than an hour, the Zorvak and Thalnari fleets had been completely annihilated. What was meant to be a mission of conquest had turned into a graveyard of broken ships and dying screams. Across the galaxy, as news of the disaster spread, fear gripped every major power. The legends had been true. The Terran Dominion had not fallen. It had simply slept. And now, it was awake once more. As the last remaining ships tried to flee, a final transmission echoed through the void, sent not just to the survivors, but to every faction in the galaxy. A voice, calm yet absolute, spoke in a language that had not been heard for millennia. This sector was once under Terran control. Conflict is not permitted. Stand down or face extermination. The message left no room for negotiation, no chance for rebellion. The war that had lasted for centuries had just met a force older, stronger, and far beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. The Zorvaks and Thalnari had believed themselves to be the most powerful forces in the universe, but now they understood the terrifying truth. The real rulers of the galaxy had returned, and they were not interested in sharing. The Zorvaks and Thalnari had been at war for centuries, and when they discovered the dormant fleet of the Terran Dominion, they thought they had found the key to final victory. Both sides, desperate for power, ignored the warnings buried in ancient texts and the silence that surrounded this forgotten armada. Thousands of warships, untouched by time, floated in the void like sleeping giants, their hulls gleaming under distant stars. The insignia of the long-lost human empire was marked on every vessel, yet no humans were found. To the aliens, this was nothing more than an abandoned relic of a vanished race. They believed that with enough effort, they could take control of the fleet and bend it to their will. It was a mistake that would cost them everything. The first to arrive were the Zorvaks, their ships breaking through the dead silence of the system. Their engineers boarded the massive warships with the excitement of conquerors, expecting to find outdated systems, rusted weapons, and powerless defenses. But as they stepped inside, they found themselves surrounded by dark corridors lined with flawless metal, walls humming softly as if the ship itself was alive. Screens flickered with unreadable text, and strange symbols pulsed across the control panels. The ship felt waiting. Yet they ignored the unease creeping into their minds, pushing forward in their arrogance. Their best scientists worked for hours to bypass the ship's security, connecting their own technology to the ancient systems. Then, without warning, the ship responded. The control panels lit up, alarms blared through the halls, and a deep mechanical voice echoed around them. WARNINGUNAUTHORIZEDACES The Zorvaks barely had time to react before the entire ship came to life. Energy surged through the massive vessel, weapons powered up, and its engines roared as though awakening from a long slumber. Outside, the other Terran warships responded in unison, their dark forms shifting as their systems activated one by one. The Zorvaks panicked. They had come expecting to find ancient, abandoned technology, but what they had really found was a sleeping beast, and they had just woken at UP.AT that very moment. The Thalnari fleet arrived, expecting to engage in battle over control of the newly discovered fleet. Instead, they witnessed the horror unfolding before them. The human warships, now fully powered, turned their weapons toward both factions, showing no distinction between friend or foe. Then, a single message was broadcast across all frequencies. Unregistered entities detected. State your allegiance to the Terran Dominion. Neither the Zorvaks nor the Thalnari had an answer. The Terran Dominion was nothing but a forgotten name in ancient records, a civilization that had vanished without a trace. No one alive knew what had happened to them, and no one had ever dared to claim to be their successor. The silence stretched for only a few seconds, but in that time, the fate of both alien civilizations was sealed. The voice returned, final and emotionless. Non-compliance detected. Engaging extermination protocols. Without hesitation, the Terran warships opened fire. The first blast came from a massive battleship, its energy cannon releasing a beam of light that cut through the lead Zorvak command ship, as if it were made of paper. The explosion was so intense that it temporarily blinded every sensor in the area. The remaining Zorvak vessels had no time to react before dozens of Terran warships descended upon them, firing with terrifying accuracy. Beams of pure energy sliced through their shields effortlessly, plasma torpedoes shattered their strongest warcruisers, and within minutes, half of their fleet was gone. The Thalnari, watching the destruction unfold, tried to escape. Their commanders shouted desperate orders, their ships turning and activating their jump drives. But before they could flee, the Terran fleet responded. Pulses of red energy erupted from the human vessels, disabling the engines of every escaping ship. Their technology was far beyond anything the Thalnari had ever seen. These were not just warships, they were executioners. One by one, the human fleet hunted them down. The surviving Zorvak ships attempted to fight back, launching everything they had. Missiles, plasma rounds, and high-energy beams rained down on the Terran warships, but the human vessels did not even flinch. Their shields absorbed the attacks without losing power, and their counterfire was devastating. Within seconds, another Zorvak dreadnought was torn apart, its remains drifting lifelessly into the void. The Thalnari, realizing there was no escape, sent out a distress signal, begging for mercy, offering peace, offering anything to stop the slaughter. But the message never reached anyone. The moment it was transmitted, a Terran vessel locked onto the source and fired a concentrated energy lance, erasing the ship from existence. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than an hour. Hundreds of ships destroyed, thousands of lives lost, and yet not a single human had been seen. The fleet moved with terrifying precision, its weapons striking with perfect coordination. There were no chaotic orders, no frantic movements, just cold, calculated destruction. It was as if the fleet itself had become a living entity, an unstoppable force that had been waiting for centuries to be reawakened. ASL, the final remnants of the Zorvak and Thalnari fleets, burned in the darkness. The human warships stopped their attack. Their weapons powered down, their movements slowed, and for a brief moment, silence returned. Then, across every communication channel in the system, a final transmission was sent not just to the remaining ships, but to every major faction in the galaxy. This is Admiral Elias Voss of the Terran Dominion. Our hibernation cycle has been interrupted. Assessing galactic situation, a long pause followed. Those who received the message held their breath, waiting for what would come next. Then, the voice spoke again. Records indicate the Dominion withdrew from the galaxy due to self-imposed exile. Yet war still ravages our former territory. This is unacceptable. Across the galaxy, leaders, warlords, and empires trembled. The war between the Zorvaks and Thalnari had been the greatest conflict in known history, yet now it meant nothing. A power far greater had returned, one that saw their struggle as nothing more than a disruption. The last surviving captains of the alien fleets could only watch in horror as the human warships turned their attention toward the rest of the galaxy. The Dominion shall restore order. Stand down or be purged. And, just like that, the war that had lasted for centuries was no longer the greatest threat in the galaxy. The real war was only just beginning. The galaxy had long forgotten the name of humanity. Once, they were among the countless species struggling for dominance, but then, without warning, they vanished. No records explained their disappearance, no ruins told their story. Their homeworld became a forbidden zone, avoided by explorers, its surface scarred by unknown catastrophes. The great empires of the galaxy, the Zorvaks, the Thalnari, and the Drexy Dominion assumed they had simply destroyed themselves in some war of their own making, a species too reckless to survive. And so, the galaxy moved on, erasing humanity from history. What none of them realized was that humanity had never been gone, they had simply been waiting. For centuries, the great empires waged their wars, conquering, enslaving, and rewriting the balance of power. Entire civilizations were wiped out, their cultures erased as the strongest factions carved the galaxy into their own empires. But then, something changed. At the farthest, edges of known space where only the reckless dared to travel, strange reports began to emerge. Fleets of unknown origin had been sighted, moving with impossible precision. They bore no markings of the known factions, their weapons left no survivors, and their technology was unlike anything ever seen before. The few that managed to flee told tales of ships that fought like ghosts, silent, deadly, unstoppable. At first, these reports were dismissed as myths, the ramblings of madmen. But then, the attacks began. The Drexy Dominion was the first to suffer. One of their largest mining colonies, a world of over 6 billion souls, went completely dark in a single night. No distress signals, no battle reports, just silence. When the Dominion sent a fleet to investigate, massive craters scarred the surface, buildings reduced to molten slag. Not a single body was found, no evidence of who or what had done this. The orbital defense platforms had been surgically dismantled, their cores removed with precision so advanced that even the Dominion's greatest scientists could not understand it. And then, before the investigating fleet could react, they were attacked. From the darkness of space, sleek black ships emerged, moving faster than any known vessel. They did not announce their arrival, did not demand surrender, they simply struck. Weapons of terrifying power tore through the Dominion warships, reducing their shields to nothing in an instant. The Drexy, known for their brutal and aggressive tactics, tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their weapons barely scratched the enemy ships. Their best pilots were outmaneuvered as if they were standing still. Within minutes, an entire Dominion Fleet One that could have conquered an entire star system was eradicated. The attackers did not stop to claim victory, did not linger to gloat. Instead, they left behind a single message, broadcast across every surviving Dominion frequency. Your crimes have not been forgotten. The Terran Dominion has returned. The message sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Humanity, a name spoken only in forgotten history, now returning in fire and vengeance. Panic spread among the great empires. The Zorvax and Thalnari scrambled to understand what had happened. How had humanity survived? Where had they been all these years? The answer came soon enough, and it was worse than they feared. Over the next few weeks, world after world fell. No warning, no negotiations. The Terran fleet struck without hesitation, systematically dismantling the power of the empires that had once ruled the galaxy. Their weapons were beyond anything imaginable. They moved with mathematical precision, their ships acting as though they shared a single mind. Their technology seemed alive, adapting to every countermeasure thrown against it. The Zorvax, the greatest military power of the modern age, attempted to launch an assault on a recently captured Terran world. They sent an entire armada, boasting hundreds of warships and the deadliest weapons in their arsenal. None of them returned. A single transmission was recovered from the fleet's admiral before all contact was lost. They are not fighting us. They are erasing us. The Thalnari, once proud rulers of the Central Galactic region, fell next. Their capital world, one of the most fortified planets in existence, was assaulted without warning. Defense satellites, planetary shields, and fleets of battleships, none of it mattered. The Terrans bypassed their defenses entirely, appearing in orbit as if they had always been there. Within hours, their cities burned. The ruling council surrendered, begging for mercy. The Terrans responded with silence. Then, for the first time since their return, a human voice spoke. It was broadcast across the entire galaxy, reaching every species, every empire, every surviving soul. The voice was calm, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of judgment. For centuries, you ruled in arrogance. You believed yourselves the masters of this galaxy, the rightful rulers of existence. You conquered, enslaved, and erased those weaker than you. You thought yourselves gods. The voice paused, and across the galaxy, leaders held their breath. Then, the message continued. But we remember. We remember what you did when we were weak. We remember the worlds you burned, the lives you took. And now we have returned. This is not war. This is justice. And with those words, the fate of the galaxy was sealed. The Terran Dominion was not here to claim power, to establish rule, or to demand tribute. They were here to punish. The empires that had once mocked humanity, dismissed them as primitive and weak, now faced an enemy they could not stop. It was not a battle for territory. It was not a war of conquest. It was an execution. Planet after planet fell. Those who surrendered were not spared. There was no escape, no deals to be made. Humanity had waited, prepared, evolved, and when they struck, they did so without mercy. The galaxy had taken everything from them, and now they were taking everything back. The ruins of what was once the greatest civilization in the known universe. A lone survivor whispered in horror as the skies above burned. We thought they were gone. We thought they were dead. But humanity never dies. And now we are the ones who will be forgotten. The distress signal repeated on an endless loop, crackling through the void like a dying whisper. It came from the edge of the known galaxy, from a sector that should have been empty. There were no colonies, no trade routes, just silence. And yet, the message was clear, spoken in a voice filled with terror. This is Captain Relik of the Zorvak Empire, requesting immediate assistance. We have made contact with something. Our fleet has been destroyed. There is no escape. Do not come here. I repeat, do not. The transmission cut off. A few seconds of static followed before the message started again. Every major faction intercepted it: the Zorvaks, the Drexy Dominion, the Thalnari Republic. At first, they assumed it was a hoax, an outdated distress call from some lost expedition. But then, the scouts they sent to investigate never returned. One by one, ships vanished without a trace, leaving only the same repeating transmission behind. Something was out there, something powerful enough to wipe fleets from existence, and it was broadcasting a warning that no one understood until it was too late. The Thalnari Republic was the first to act. Their high command assembled an elite armada, led by Admiral Vekris, a warrior with decades of experience. His fleet of warships jumped into the sector, weapons armed, ready for battle. They expected to find pirates, perhaps a lost AI war machine, or some unknown alien threat. What they found was far worse. The moment they arrived, they realized the distress signal had not been a warning for Captain Relik, it had been a warning for everyone. The wreckage of countless ships floated in the blackness, torn apart with surgical precision. Some were reduced to drifting husks, their hulls melted beyond recognition. Others bore strange burns, as if their atoms had been destabilized at the molecular level. And then, the sensors picked up something moving in the darkness. At first, they thought it was debris. Then, the shapes shifted. Hundreds, no, thousands of sleek black ships emerged from the shadows, moving with an unnatural predatory grace. They bore no insignia, no markings of any known species. They were perfectly silent, no signals, no transmissions, just watching. Admiral Vekris ordered his fleet to open fire, unleashing the full firepower of the Thalnari Republic. Beams of high-energy plasma streaked across the void, missiles tore through space, and railguns fired hyper-accelerated projectiles at near-light speeds. Every weapon designed to destroy an enemy. None of them hit. Before their eyes, the black ships moved. Not dodging, not evading they anticipated. Every shot passed through empty space where the targets had been milliseconds before. And then, the retaliation came. The first Thalnari warship exploded without warning, its shields useless, its armor turned to dust in an instant. Then, another. And another. The black ship struck with pinpoint accuracy, disassembling the fleet ship by ship, breaking them apart as if they were testing their weaknesses. The Thalnari fleet, once the pride of their empire, was reduced to nothing. Admiral Vekris, his ship burning around him, sent out one final transmission before his vessel was erased from existence. They are not an unknown enemy. They are not an invading force. They are the remnants of something we should have never forgotten. This is not war. This is retribution. This is humanity. The message was received across the galaxy, but by the time anyone could react, it was already too late. The Terran Dominion had returned. For centuries, humanity had been a myth, a name buried in the oldest records. It was said they had once ruled a vast empire, stretching across the stars, before vanishing without a trace. Some believed they had destroyed themselves in war. Others claimed they had fled beyond the edges of the galaxy. The truth was far worse. Humanity had never disappeared. They had been waiting. Watching from the shadows, hidden beyond the reach of any empire, they had seen everything: the rise and fall of civilizations, the wars, the conquests, the crimes. And now, after centuries of silence, they had decided to act. Within days, their ships appeared everywhere. No empire was safe. No fleet could resist. The Drexy Dominion's largest battle station, a fortress that had withstood sieges for centuries, was obliterated in seconds. The Zorvak warlords, who had enslaved hundreds of worlds, found themselves hunted. The Thalnari homeworld, once a beacon of power, was shrouded in darkness as its planetary defenses were dismantled before its rulers' very eyes. There were no demands, no negotiations, only destruction. And through it all, one message was broadcast, a final transmission sent across the entire galaxy. The Terran Dominion remembers. We have seen your wars. We have seen your cruelty. We have seen the way you laughed when our name was forgotten. But now, we are the ones who remember, and you will be the ones who vanish. No one knew where humanity had gone. No one knew how they had survived, or how their technology had advanced beyond comprehension. The only thing certain was that they had come back, and they were not here to conquer. They were here to erase. Entire fleets surrendered, entire worlds begged for mercy, but the response was always the same: humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. This is the end. And as the galaxy burned, the last transmission echoed across the stars, fading into the cold void. For centuries, the Great War had raged across the galaxy. The Drexy Dominion and the Thalnari Republic had fought for absolute control, their fleets clashing in battles that consumed entire star systems. Worlds burned, civilizations crumbled, and yet the war never ended. Each side poured everything into their weapons, building more powerful warships, more devastating strategies, but no victory ever came. The balance of power remained locked, an endless cycle of death with no winner. Then, without warning, everything changed. IT began with an anomaly. A single, unidentified object appeared at the heart of the conflict, deep within the dead zone between the Drexy and Thalnari battle lines. It was not a ship, nor was it a known type of weapon. It simply existed, floating in the void, silent and unmoving. Both sides immediately took notice. Advanced scanners attempted to analyze it, but the object gave no readings, no energy signatures, no material composition. It was as if the thing was made of nothing. The Drexy High Command ordered a cautious approach, sending a squadron of interceptors to investigate. The Thalnari, unwilling to let their enemies claim the discovery first, dispatched their own warships. The first ship that got too close ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no impact, no trace of debris, just absence. One moment the vessel was there, engines burning, weapons armed, and the next it was gone. No distress call, no emergency signals. The other ships halted immediately, their crews frozen in horror. Whatever the object was, it had erased a fully armed warship as if it had never been there. Panic spread through the ranks. The Thalnari warships locked onto the anomaly, preparing to fire, but before they could pull the trigger, something woke up. The object shifted. A ripple spread across space itself, an unseen force warping reality as the anomaly expanded. And then, a signal was sent, a transmission in a language neither the Drexy nor the Thalnari had heard in millennia. It was a voice, calm, emotionless, filled with something that wasn't anger, yet far worse. This war is over. The moment the words were spoken, the anomaly unfolded. It was no longer a simple object, but an entire structure, hidden within space itself. A fleet emerged, not Drexy, not Thalnari, but something far more ancient. The ships were colossal, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their surfaces shimmered with an unknown metal, reflecting starlight in unnatural ways. Their weapons, if they even had weapons, were unreadable by any known sensors. And at the center of it all, A symbol appeared on every screen, on every ship across the war-torn battlefield. A symbol the galaxy had forgotten long ago. The mark of humanity. The realization came too late. The fleets of the Drexi and the Thalnari scrambled to react, but there was nothing they could do. The human ships did not fire lasers or missiles. They did not engage in traditional warfare. Instead, they commanded reality itself. A single pulse swept across the battlefield. One moment, there were thousands of warships, locked in eternal conflict. The next, the war was over. Every Drexi and Thalnari warship simply shut down. Not destroyed, not disabled, just dead. Their engines flickered out, their weapons powered down, their AI systems ceased functioning. Their crews remained alive, trapped inside floating metal coffins, helpless to do anything but watch. Across the battlefield, the two greatest military powers of the galaxy had been rendered completely powerless. The human fleet did not explain, did not negotiate. They had returned not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as judges. Their silence was louder than any battle cry, their mere presence rewriting the fate of the galaxy. Then, as swiftly as they had arrived, they vanished. The war that had lasted for centuries, the war that had consumed countless lives, ended in an instant. And with it came a final message sent to every surviving warship, every world, every leader who had once believed they held power. This is not your galaxy. You have played with destruction long enough. You will not be given another warning. We are humanity. We have returned. The message echoed across the stars, leaving behind only silence.